Chapter 41, Work and Education. Our minds have been much exercised day and night in regard to our schools. How shall they be conducted, and what shall be the education and training of the youth? Where shall our Australian Bible school be located? I was awakened this morning at 1 o'clock with a heavy burden upon my soul. The subject of education has been presented before me in different lines, in varied aspects, by many illustrations and with direct specifications, now upon one point and again upon another. I feel indeed that we have much to learn. We are ignorant in regard to many things. In writing and speaking upon the life of John the Baptist and the life of Christ, I have tried to present that which has been presented to me in regard to the education of our youth. We are under obligation to God to study this subject candidly, for it is worthy of close, critical examination upon every side. Of John the Baptist, Christ declared, "Of them that are born of women there hath not arisen a greater." That prophet was led by the Spirit of God into the wilderness, away from the contaminating influences of the city, to obtain an education that would qualify him to receive instruction from God rather than from any of the learned scribes. He was not to connect himself with the rabbis. The less he became acquainted with their teachings, their maxims and traditions, the more easily could the Lord impress his mind and heart and give him the pure mold of truth that was to be given to the people to prepare the way of the Lord. The teachings of the scribes and Pharisees were of a character to turn the people away from the unadulterated truth that was to be presented by the great teacher when he should enter upon his mission. The only hope of the people was to open their hearts and minds to the light sent from heaven by his prophet, the forerunner of Christ. These lessons are for us. Those who claim to know the truth and understand the great work to be done for this time are to consecrate themselves to God, soul, body, and spirit. In heart, in dress, in language, in every respect, they are to be separate from the fashions and practices of the world. They are to be a peculiar and holy people. It is not their dress that makes them peculiar, but because they are a peculiar and holy people, they cannot carry the marks of likeness to the world. As a people, we are to prepare the way of the Lord. Every iota of ability God has given us must be put to use in preparing the people after God's fashion, after his spiritual mold, to stand in this great day of God's preparation. And the serious question may be awakened in world-loving hearts: what is eternity to us? How will my case stand in the investigative judgment? What will be my lot and place? Many who suppose they are going to heaven are blindfolded by the world. Their ideas of what constitutes a religious education and religious discipline are vague, resting only on probabilities. There are many who have no intelligent hope and are running great risk in practicing the very things which Jesus has taught them they should not do, in eating, drinking, and dressing, binding themselves up with the world in a variety of ways. They have yet to learn the serious lessons so essential to growth in spirituality, to come out from the world and be separate. The heart is divided. The carnal mind craves conformity, similarity to the world in so many ways that the mark of distinction from the world is scarcely distinguishable. Money, God's money, is expended in order to make an appearance after the world's customs. The religious experience is contaminated with worldliness and the evidence of discipleship. Christ's likeness in self-denial and cross-bearing is not discernible by the world or by the universe of heaven. In this country, Satan has in a most striking manner enthroned himself to control the leading men in the government of the nation. The education which they have received from childhood is erroneous. Many things are regarded as essential which have a most injurious effect upon the people. The many holidays have had a baleful influence upon the minds of the youth. Their effect is demoralizing to the government, and they are entirely contrary to the will of God. They have a tendency to encourage an artificial excitement, a desire for amusement. The people are led to squander precious time which should be employed in useful labor to sustain their families honestly and keep clear of debt. The passion for amusement and the squandering of money in horse racing, in betting, and in various similar lines is increasing the poverty of the country and deepening the misery that is the sure result of this kind of education. Never can the proper education be given to the youth in this country or any other country unless they are separated a wide distance from the cities. The customs and practices in the cities unfit the minds of the youth for the entrance of truth. The liquor drinking, the smoking and gambling, the horse racing, the theater going, the great importance placed upon holidays are all a species of idolatry, a sacrifice upon idol altars. If people conscientiously attend to their lawful business upon the holidays, they are regarded as mean-spirited and unpatriotic. The Lord cannot be served in this way. Those who multiply the days for pleasure and amusement are really giving patronage to liquor sellers and are taking from the poor the very means that should purchase food and clothing for their children. The very means that used economically would soon provide a dwelling place for their families. These evils we can only touch upon. It is not the correct plan to locate school buildings where the students will have constantly before their eyes the erroneous practices that have molded their education during their lifetime, be it longer or shorter. These holidays, with all their train of evil, result in 20-fold more misery than good. In a large degree, the observance of these days is really compulsory. Even persons who have been truly converted find it difficult to break away from these customs and practices. Should schools be located in the cities or within a few miles from them, it would be most difficult to counteract the influence of the former education which students had received in regard to these holidays and the practices connected with them, such as horse racing, betting, and the offering of prizes. The very atmosphere of these cities is full of poisonous malaria. The freedom of individual action is not respected. A man's time is not regarded as really his own, but he is expected to do as others do. Should our school be located in one of these cities or within a few miles of it, there would be a counterworking influence, constantly an active exercise to be met and overcome. The devotion to amusements and the observance of so many holidays gives a large business to the courts, to officers and judges, and increase the poverty and squalor that need no increasing. All this is false education. We shall find it necessary to establish our schools out of and away from the cities, and yet not so far away that they cannot be in touch with them, to do them good, to let the light shine amid the moral darkness. Students need to be placed under the most favorable circumstances to counteract very much of the education they have received. Entire families are in need of thorough transformation in their habits and ideas before they can be true representatives of Jesus Christ. And to a great extent, children who are to receive an education in our schools will make far more advancement if separated from the family circle where they have received an erroneous education. It may be necessary for some families to locate where they can board their children and save expense, but in many cases it would prove a hindrance rather than a blessing to their children. The people in this country have so little appreciation of the importance of industrious habits that the children are not educated to do real earnest work. This must be a part of the education given to the youth. God gave Adam and Eve employment. Eden was a school for our first parents, and God was their instructor. They learned how to till the soil and to care for the things which the Lord had planted. They did not regard labor as degrading, but as a great blessing. Industry was a pleasure to Adam and Eve. The fall of Adam changed the order of things. The earth was cursed. But the decree that man should earn his bread by the sweat of his brow was not given as a curse. Through faith and hope, labor was to be a blessing to the descendants of Adam and Eve. God never meant that man should have nothing to do. But the more and deeper the curse of sin, the more the order of God is changed. The burden of toil rests heavily upon a certain class, but the curse of idleness is upon many who are in possession of God's money, and all because of the false idea that money increases the moral worth of men. Labor is to human beings what they make it. To delve in constant toil, seeking momentary relief and liquor drinking and exciting amusements will make men little better than the brutes. We need schools in this country to educate children and youth that they may be masters of labor and not slaves of labor. Ignorance and idleness will not elevate one member of the human family. Ignorance will not lighten the lot of the hard toiler. Let the worker see what advantage he may gain in the humblest occupation by using the ability God has given him as an endowment. Thus he can become an educator, teaching others the art of doing work intelligently. He may understand what it means to love God with the heart, the soul, the mind, and the strength. The physical powers are to be brought into service from love to God. The Lord wants the physical strength, and you can reveal your love for Him by the right use of your physical powers, doing the very work which needs to be done. There is no respect of persons with God. When the tabernacle was built in the wilderness for the service of God, the work was done under divine direction. God was the designer. The workmen were educated by Him, and they put heart and soul and strength into the work. There was hard labor to be done, and the sturdy mechanic taxed muscle and sinew, manifesting his love to God in toil for His honor. There is in the world a great deal of hard taxing work to be done, and he who labors without exercising the God-given powers of mind and heart and soul, he who employs the physical strength alone, makes the work a wearisome task and burden. There are men with mind, heart, and soul who regard work as a drudgery and settle down to it with self-complacent ignorance, delving without thought, without taxing the mental capabilities in order to do the work better. There is science in the humblest kind of work, and if all would thus regard it, they would see nobility in labor. Heart and soul are to be put into work of any kind. Then there is cheerfulness and efficiency. In agricultural or mechanical occupation, men may give evidence to God that they appreciate His gift in the physical powers and the mental faculties as well. Let the educated ability be employed in devising improved methods of work. This is what the Lord wants. There is honor in any class of work that is essential to be done. Let the law of God be made the standard of action, and it ennobles and sanctifies all labor. Faithfulness in the discharge of every duty makes the work noble and reveals a character that God can approve. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. God desires a love that is expressed in heart service, in soul service, in the service of the physical powers. We are not to be dwarfed in any kind of service for God. Whatever He has lent us is to be used intelligently for Him. The man who exercises his faculties will surely strengthen them, but he must seek to do his best. There is need of intelligence and educated ability to devise the best methods in farming, in building, and in every other department, that the worker may not labor in vain. It is not a virtue for men and women to excuse slow bungling at work of any character. The slow habits must be overcome. The man who is slow and does his work at a disadvantage is an unprofitable workman. His slowness is a defect that needs to be seen and corrected. He needs to exercise his intellect in planning how to use his time so as to secure the best results. When one is forever at work and the work is never done, it is because mind and heart are not put into the work. It takes some persons 10 hours to do that which another accomplishes readily in 5. Such workmen do not bring tact and method into their labor. There is something to be learned every day as to how to improve in the manner of labor so as to get through the work and have time for something else. It is the duty of every worker not merely to give his strength, but his mind and intellect to that which he undertakes to do. Some who are engaged in domestic labor are always at work. It is not because they have so much to do, but they do not plan in such a way as to have time. They should give themselves a certain time to accomplish their task and make every move tell. Dullness and ignorance are no virtue. You can choose to become stereotyped in a wrong course of action because you have not the determination to take yourself in hand and to reform, or you may cultivate your powers to do the very best kind of service, and then you will find yourselves in demand anywhere and everywhere. You will be appreciated for all that you are worth. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. Not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Australia needs the leaven of sound, solid common sense to be freely introduced into all her cities and towns. There is need of proper education. Schools should be established for the purpose of obtaining not only knowledge from books, but knowledge of practical industry. Men are needed in different communities to show the people how the riches are to be obtained from the soil. The cultivation of land will bring its return. Through the observance of holidays, the people, both of the world and of the churches, have been educated to believe that these lazy days are essential to health and happiness. But the results reveal that they are full of evil, which is ruining the country. The youth generally are not educated to diligent habits. Cities and even country towns are becoming like Sodom and Gomorrah, and like the world in the days of Noah. The training of the youth in those days was after the same order as children are being educated and trained in this age to love excitement, to glorify themselves, to follow the imagination of their own evil hearts. Now as then, depravity, cruelty, violence, and crime are the result. All these things are lessons for us. Few now are really industrious and economical. Poverty and distress are on every hand. There are men to work hard and obtain very little for their labor. There is need of much more extensive knowledge in regard to the preparation of the soil. There is not sufficient breadth of view as to what can be realized from the earth. A narrow and unvarying routine is followed with discouraging results. The land boom has cursed this country. Extravagant prices have been paid for lands bought on credit. Then the land must be cleared and more money is hired. A house is to be built, calls for more money. And then interest with open mouth swallows up all the profits. Debts accumulate, and then come the closing and failure of banks, and then the foreclosure of mortgages. Thousands have been turned out of employment. Families lose their little all. They borrow and borrow, and then they have to give up their property and come out penniless. Much money and hard labor have been put into farms bought on credit or inherited with an encumbrance. The occupants live in hope of becoming real owners, and it might have been so but for the failure of banks throughout the country. Now the case where a man owns his place clear is a happy exception to the rule. Merchants are failing. Families are suffering for food and clothing. No work presents itself, but the holidays are just as numerous. Their amusements are entered into as eagerly. All who can do so will spend their hard-earned pence and shillings and pounds for a taste of pleasure, for strong drink or some other indulgence. The papers that report the poverty of the people have regular standing notices of the horse races and of the prizes presented for different kinds of exciting sports. The shows, the theaters, and all such demoralizing amusements are taking the money from the country, and poverty is continually increasing. Poor men will invest their last shilling in a lottery hoping to secure a prize, and they have to beg for food to sustain life or go hungry. Many die of hunger, and many put an end to their existence. The end is not yet. Men take you to their orchards of oranges and lemons and other fruits and tell you that the produce does not pay for the work done in them. It is next to impossible to make ends meet, and parents decide that the children shall not be farmers. They have not the courage and hope to educate them to till the soil. What is needed is schools to educate and train the youth so that they will know how to overcome this condition of things. There must be education in the sciences and education in plans and methods of working the soil. There is hope in the soil, but brain and heart and strength must be brought into the work of tilling it. The money devoted to horse racing, theater going, gambling, and lotteries, the money spent in the public houses for beer and strong drink, let it be expended in making the land productive, and we shall see a different state of things. This country needs educated farmers. The Lord gives the showers of rain and the blessed sunshine. He gives to men all their powers. Let them devote heart and mind and strength to doing His will and obedience to His commandments. Let them cut off every pernicious habit, never expending a penny for beer or liquor of any kind, nor for tobacco, having nothing to do with horse racing or similar sports, and then commit themselves to God, working with their endowment of physical strength, and their labor will not be in vain. That God, whom has made the world for the benefit of man, will provide means from the earth to sustain the diligent worker. The seed placed in thoroughly prepared soil will produce its harvest. God can spread a table for His people in the wilderness. The various trades and occupations have to be learned. and they call into exercise a great variety of mental and physical capabilities. The occupations requiring sedentary habits are the most dangerous, for they take men away from the open air and sunshine and train one set of faculties, while other organs are becoming weak from inaction. Many carry on their work, perfect their business, and soon lie down in the grave. Much more favorable is the condition of one whose occupation keeps him in the open air, exercises his muscles while the brain is equally taxed, and all the organs have the privilege of doing their work. To those who can live outside of the cities and labor in the open air, beholding the works of the great master artist, new scenes are continually unfolding. As they make the book of nature their study, a softening, subduing influence comes over them, for they realize that God's care is over all, from the glorious sun in the heavens to the little brown sparrow or the tiniest insect that has life. The majesty of heaven has pointed us to these things of God's creation as an evidence of His love. He who fashioned the flowers has said, "Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin, and yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Wherefore, if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall He not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith?" The Lord is our teacher, and under His instruction we may learn the most precious lessons from nature. The world is under the curse of sin, and yet even in its decay it is very beautiful. If it were not defiled by the wicked, corrupt deeds of the men who tread the soil, we could, with the blessing of God, enjoy our world as it is. But ignorance, pleasure-loving, and sinful habits, corrupting soul, body, and spirit, make the world full of moral leprosy. A deadly moral malaria is destroying thousands and tens of thousands. What can be done to save our youth? We can do little, but God lives and reigns, and He can do much. The youth are our hope for missionary labor. Schools should be established where there is as much as possible to be found in nature to delight the senses and give variety to the scenery, while we shun the false and artificial, discarding horse racing, card playing, lotteries, prize fights, liquor drinking, and tobacco using. We must supply sources of pleasure that are pure and noble and elevating. We should choose a location for our school apart from the cities, where the eye will not rest continually upon the dwellings of men, but upon the works of God, where there shall be places of interest for them to visit, other than what the city affords. Let our students be placed where nature can speak to the senses, and in her voice they may hear the voice of God. Let them be where they can look upon His wondrous works, and through nature behold her Creator. The youth in this country require more earnest spiritual labor than in any other country we have yet visited. Temptations are strong and numerous. The many holidays and the habits of idleness are most unfavorable for the young. Satan makes the idle man a partaker and co-worker in his schemes, and the Lord Jesus does not abide in the heart by faith. The children and youth are not educated to realize that their influence is a power for good or for evil. It should ever be kept before them how much they can accomplish. They should be encouraged to reach the highest standard of rectitude. But from their youth up, they have been educated to the popular idea that the appointed holidays must be treated with respect and be observed. From the light that the Lord has given me, these days have no more influence for good than would the worship of heathen deities. For this is really nothing less. These days are Satan's special harvest seasons. The money drawn from men and women is expended for that which is not bread. The youth are educated to love those things which are demoralizing, things which the Word of God condemns. The influence is evil, and only evil continually. Manual occupation for the youth is essential. The mind is not to be constantly taxed to the neglect of the physical powers. The ignorance of physiology and a neglect to observe the laws of health have brought many to the grave who might have lived to labor and study intelligently. The proper exercise of mind and body will develop and strengthen all the powers. Both mind and body will be preserved and will be capable of doing a variety of work. Ministers and teachers need to learn in regard to these things, and they need to practice as well. The proper use of their physical strength as well as of the mental powers will equalize the circulation of the blood and keep every organ of the living machinery in running order. Minds are often abused. They are goaded on to madness by pursuing one line of thought, and the excessive employment of the brain power and the neglect of the physical organs creates a diseased condition of things in the system. Every faculty of the mind may be exercised with comparative safety if the physical powers are equally taxed and the subject of thought varied. We need a change of employment, and nature is a living, healthful teacher. When students enter the school to obtain an education, the instructors should endeavor to surround them with objects of the most pleasing, interesting character, that the mind may not be confined to the dead study of books. The school should not be in or near a city where its extravagance, its wicked pleasures, its wicked customs and practices will require constant work to counteract the prevailing iniquity, that it may not poison the very atmosphere which the students breathe. All schools should be located as far as possible where the eye will rest upon the things of nature instead of clusters of houses. The ever-shifting scenery will gratify the taste and control the imagination. Here is a living teacher instructing constantly. I have been troubled over many things in regard to our school. In their work, the young men are associated with the young women and are doing the work which belongs to women. This is nearly all that can be found for them to do as they are now situated. But from the light given me, this is not the kind of education that the young men need. It does not give them the knowledge they need to take with them to their homes. There should be a different kind of labor opened before them that would give opportunity to keep the physical powers equally taxed with the mental. There should be land for cultivation. The time is not far distant when the laws against Sunday labor will be more stringent, and an effort should be made to secure grounds away from the cities where fruits and vegetables can be raised. Agriculture will open resources for self-support, and various other trades also could be learned. This real, earnest work calls for strength of intellect as well as of muscle. Method and tact are required even to raise fruits and vegetables successfully, and habits of industry will be found an important aid to the youth in resisting temptation. Here is opened a field to give vent to their pent-up energies that, if not expended in useful employment, will be a continual source of trial to themselves and their teachers. Many kinds of labor adapted to different persons may be devised, but the working of the land will be a special blessing to the worker. There is great want of intelligent men to till the soil who will be thorough. This kind of knowledge will not be a hindrance to the education essential for business or for usefulness in any line. To develop the capacity of the soil requires thought and intelligence. Not only will it develop muscle, but capability for study, because the action of the brain and muscle is equalized. We should so train the youth that they will love to work upon the land and delight in improving it. The hope of advancing the cause of God in this country is in creating a new moral taste in love of work, which will transform mind and character. False witness has been born in condemning land, which, if properly worked, would yield rich returns. The narrow plans, a little strength put forth, a little study as to the best methods will call loudly for reform. The people need to learn that patient labor will do wonders. There is much mourning over unproductive soil, when if men would read the Old Testament Scriptures, they would see that the Lord knew much better than they in regard to the proper treatment of land. After being cultivated for several years and giving her treasure to the possession of man, portions of the land should be allowed to rest, and then the crop should be changed. We might learn also from the New Testament in regard to the labor problem. If men would follow the directions of Christ in regard to remembering the poor and supplying their necessities, what a different place this world would be. Let God's glory be kept ever in view, and if the crop is a failure, be not discouraged. Try it again. But remember that you can have no harvest unless the ground is properly prepared for the seed. Failure may be wholly due to neglect on this point. The school to be established in Australia should bring the question of industry to the front and reveal the fact that physical labor has its place in God's plan for every man, and that His blessing will attend it. The schools established by those who teach and practice the truth for this time should be so conducted as to bring fresh and new incentives into all kinds of practical labor. There will be much to try the educators, but a great and noble object has been gained when students shall feel that love for God is to be revealed not only in devotion of heart and mind and soul, but in the apt, wise appropriation of their strength. Their temptations will be far less. From them, by precept and example, a light will radiate amid the erroneous theories and fashionable customs of the world. Their influence will tend to correct the false idea that ignorance is the mark of a gentleman. God would be glorified if men from other countries who have acquired an intelligent knowledge of agriculture would come to this land and by precept and example teach the people how to cultivate the soil that it may yield rich treasures. Men are wanted to educate others how to plow and how to use the implements of agriculture. Who will be missionaries to do this work, to teach proper methods to the youth and to all who feel willing and humble enough to learn. If any do not want you to give them improved ideas, let the lessons be given silently, showing what can be done in setting out orchards and planting corn. Let the harvest be eloquent in favor of right methods of labor. Drop a word to your neighbor when you can. Keep up the culture of your own land, and that will educate. It may be urged by some that our school must be in the city in order to give influence to our work, and that if it is in the country, the influence is lost to the cities, but this is not necessarily the case. The youth who attend our school for the first time are not prepared to exert a correct influence in any city as light shining amid the darkness. They will not be prepared to reflect light until the darkness of their own erroneous education is dispelled. In the future, our school will not be the same as it has been in the past. Among the students, there have been reliable, experienced men who have taken advantage of the opportunity to gain more knowledge in order to do intelligent work in the cause of God. These have been a help in the school, for they have been as a balance wheel. But in the future, the school will consist mostly of those who need to be transformed in character and who will need to have much patient labor bestowed upon them. They have to unlearn and learn again. It will take time to develop the true missionary spirit, and the farther they are removed from the cities and the temptations that are flooding them, the more favorable it will be for them to obtain the true knowledge and develop well-balanced characters. Farmers need far more intelligence in their work. In most cases, it is their own fault if they do not see the land yielding its harvest. They should be constantly learning how to secure a variety of treasures from the earth. The people should learn as far as possible to depend upon the products that they can obtain from the soil. In every case of this kind of labor, they can be educating the mind to work for the saving of souls for whom Christ has died. Ye are God's husbandry, ye are God's building. Let the teachers in our schools take their students with them into the gardens and fields and teach them how to work the soil in the very best manner. It would be well if ministers who labor in word or doctrine could enter the fields and spend some portion of the day in physical exercise with the students. They could do as Christ did in giving lessons from nature to illustrate Bible truth. Both teachers and students would have much more healthful experience in spiritual things and much stronger minds and purer hearts to interpret eternal mysteries than they can have while studying books so constantly and working the brain without taxing the muscles. God has given men and women reasoning powers, and He would have them employ their reason in regard to the use of their physical machinery. The question may be asked, how can He get wisdom that holdeth the plow and driveth oxen? By seeking her as silver and searching for her as for hid treasures. For his God doth instruct him to discretion, and doth teach him. This also cometh forth from the Lord of hosts, which is wonderful in counsel and excellent in working. He who taught Adam and Eve in Eden how to tend the garden would instruct men today. There is wisdom for him who holds the plow and plants and sows the seed. The earth has its concealed treasures, and the Lord would have thousands and tens of thousands working upon the soil who are crowded into the cities to watch for a chance to earn a trifle. In many cases, that trifle is not turned into bread, but is put into the till of the publican to obtain that which destroys the reason of man formed in the image of God. Those who will take their families into the country place them where they have fewer temptations. The children who are with parents that love and fear God are in every way much better situated to learn of the great teacher who is the source and fountain of wisdom. They have a much more favorable opportunity to gain a fitness for the kingdom of heaven. Send the children to schools located in the city where every phase of temptation is waiting to attract and demoralize them, and the work of character building is tenfold harder for both parents and children. The earth is to be made to give forth its strength, but without the blessing of God it could do nothing. In the beginning God looked upon all that He had made and pronounced it very good. The curse it was brought upon the earth in consequence of sin. But shall this curse be multiplied by increasing sin? Ignorance is doing its baleful work. Slothful servants are increasing the evil by their lazy habits. Men are unwilling to earn their bread by the sweat of their brow, and they refuse to till the soil. But the earth has blessings hidden in her depths for those who have courage and will persevere to gather her treasures. Fathers and mothers who possess a piece of land and a comfortable home are kings and queens. Many farmers have failed to secure adequate returns from their land because they have undertaken the work as though it was a degrading employment. They do not see that there is a blessing in it for themselves and their families. All they can discern is the brand of servitude. Their orchards are neglected, the crops are not put in at the right season, and a mere surface work is done in cultivating the soil. Many neglect their farms in order to keep holidays and to attend horse races and betting clubs. Their money is expended in shows and lotteries and idleness, and then they plead that they cannot obtain the money to cultivate the soil and improve their farms. But had they more money, the result would still be the same. Special Testimonies on Education, February 1894.